In a small, noisy city where everyone seemed to be shouting to make themselves heard, there was one person who always stayed in the shadows. People called her the Quiet One. She wasn't invisible exactly. People noticed her when they needed their coffee refilled or saw her cleaning offices late at night, but no one really saw her. Not the way she deserved to be seen. That her name was Maya. She lived in a tiny apartment with her younger brother, who had health problems that kept him in and out of hospitals. Between working 2 jobs and taking care of him, Maya didn't have much time for anything else. During the day, she worked as a barista at a local cafe, smiling politely even though most customers barely looked up from their phones. At night, she cleaned office buildings downtown, mopping floors and emptying trash cans while everyone else slept. Life was hard, but Maya didn't complain. Complaining wouldn't pay the bills. What people didn't know about Maya was that she carried fire inside her. It burned quietly, deep down, hidden beneath her calm exterior. Every evening after her shifts ended, she would go to the basement of her apartment building. There, tucked away behind stacks of old boxes and broken furniture, stood an ancient punching bag. Someone must have left it behind years ago, probably thinking it was useless. But for Maya, it became her escape. She'd change into worn-out sneakers and start hitting the bag. Jab, cross, hook. The rhythm came naturally to her now. Sweat dripped onto the cold concrete floor as she moved, her fists pounding against the leather until her arms ached. No music played, no cheering crowds cheered her on. Just the sound of her breath and the creak of the chain holding the bag steady. This was her world, private and safe. A place where she could let out all the anger, frustration, and fear without anyone watching. Maya learned how to fight from her father. He wasn't a professional boxer, but he loved the sport. When she was little, he used to sit her on his lap and tell her stories about famous fighters who overcame impossible odds. Discipline, he'd say, tapping his temple. That's what makes you strong. After he passed away when Maya was 16, those lessons stuck with her. They weren't just about boxing anymore. They were about surviving. One rainy night, everything changed. Maya was walking home from work, umbrella in hand, trying to avoid puddles on the uneven sidewalk. As she turned a corner near an abandoned warehouse, she heard yelling. At first, she thought it was just another argument spilling out of a bar. But then she saw them, a group of men surrounding someone on the ground. One of them kicked the person lying there, hard enough to make them groan in pain. Maya froze. Her heart pounded in her chest. She should have kept walking. It wasn't her business, right? But something inside her snapped. Maybe it was the memory of her dad teaching her to stand up for herself. Or maybe it was the image of her brother, fragile and sick, flashing through her mind. Whatever it was, she couldn't ignore it. "Stop!" she shouted, stepping closer. Her voice trembled, but it cut through the chaos like a knife. The men turned to look at her, surprised. One of them smirked and took a step forward. That's when Maya moved. Without thinking, she lunged at him, driving her knee into his leg and following up with a punch to his throat. The man stumbled back, clutching his neck, gasping for air. The others hesitated, shocked by this sudden burst of aggression from someone who looked so unassuming. In that moment of confusion, the person on the ground managed to crawl away, disappearing into the darkness. Maya backed off too, adrenaline coursing through her veins. She didn't wait around to see what happened next. She ran home, heart racing, hands shaking. The next morning, rumors spread like wildfire through the underground fighting circuit. Someone had taken down 3 seasoned fighters single-handedly, and she hadn't even said a word during the entire altercation. Word reached Javier, the ruthless organizer of the city's most notorious underground fights, known as El Fantasma. Because he always seemed to know everything, Javier prided himself on finding raw talent. And Maya? She intrigued him. He found her easily enough. She wasn't hard to track down, not when she lived such a predictable life, working the same shifts every week. One afternoon, he walked into the cafe where she worked. He ordered black coffee and watched her closely as she moved behind the counter. His gaze made her uncomfortable, like he was studying her every move. "You're the girl from last night," he said casually when she brought his drink. "It wasn't a question. I run the fights you stumbled into. You've got talent. I want you to compete." Maya felt a chill run down her spine. Compete? In illegal underground brawls? She shook her head firmly. "No thanks," she muttered, turning to leave. But Javier wasn't used to being turned down. Leaning closer, he lowered his voice. "Your brother's hospital bills are piling up, aren't they? I can help if you fight for me." Her stomach churned. How did he know about her brother? Was this some kind of threat? Before she could answer, Javier slid a business card across the table. "Think about it," he said, standing up. "You've got potential, kid. Don't waste it." For days, Maya wrestled with a decision. On one hand, stepping into that world felt dangerous, reckless even. But on the other, the promise of financial relief loomed large. After another sleepless night spent staring at her brother's growing stack of medical invoices, she made her choice. She picked up the phone and dialed the number on the card. Her first match took place in a dimly lit warehouse packed with rowdy spectators. The air reeked of sweat and desperation. Opposite her stood a burly woman twice her size, sneering confidently. Maya didn't flinch. When the bell rang, she moved with precision, dodging blows and landing calculated strikes. By the end of the round, her opponent lay unconscious on the mat. The crowd erupted in cheers, not because they liked her, but because she'd proven herself unpredictable. For the first time in years, Maya felt seen. And though she hated to admit it, she liked it. Maya's decision to step into the underground fighting world wasn't made lightly. It felt like signing her soul over to something dangerous, something she couldn't fully control. But desperation has a way of making people do things they wouldn't normally consider. Her brother's medical bills were suffocating her stacks of papers filled with numbers that seemed impossible to pay off. Every day was a struggle just to keep their heads above water. When Javier slid that business card across the table, it felt less like an invitation and more like a lifeline. The morning after their conversation, Maya found herself staring at the card on her kitchen counter. The letters were bold and simple. El Fantasma. She turned it over in her hands, running her fingers along the edges. What did she have to lose? If she said no, nothing would change. The debt would still be there, looming over her like a storm cloud. If she said yes, well, at least there was a chance. She picked up the phone and dialed the number. Her heart raced as it rang, each tone dragging out longer than the last. Finally, someone answered, a gruff voice on the other end. "Yeah?" It said, "It's me," Maya replied, her voice barely above a whisper, "from the cafe." There was a pause, then a chuckle. "Knew you'd call," the voice said. "It was Javier. Be ready. I'll send someone for you tomorrow night." Tomorrow night. Those words echoed in her mind all day. She tried to focus on work, but her thoughts kept drifting back to what she had agreed to. Was she crazy? What if she got hurt? What if someone found out? She shook her head, trying to clear the doubts. There was no turning back now. That evening, she went to the basement gym earlier than usual. The punching bag swung lazily as she walked in, waiting for her like an old friend. She wrapped her hands tightly with tape, pulling it snug around her knuckles. Then she started hitting. Jab, cross, hook. The rhythm helped calm her nerves. She imagined the faces of those men from the alleyway, their sneers and smirks melting away with each punch. By the time she finished, her arms were sore and her shirt clung to her skin with sweat. But she felt better. Stronger. The next night, a black car pulled up outside her apartment building exactly at 9 o'clock. Maya hesitated before stepping. Inside, clutching the straps of her backpack like it might protect her somehow. The driver didn't say a word, just nodded toward the back seat. As they drove through the city streets, Maya stared out the window, watching the neon lights blur together. Her stomach churned with a mix of fear and excitement. They arrived at an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. The place looked like it hadn't been touched in years, its walls covered in graffiti and its windows boarded up. Inside, however, was a different story. The space buzzed with energy, filled with rowdy spectators shouting and cheering. Chains hung from the ceiling, holding up floodlights that cast harsh shadows across the room. In the center stood a makeshift ring, surrounded by people placing bets and arguing over odds. Javier spotted her immediately and waved her over. He introduced her to a few fighters who lounged nearby, sipping water or stretching their muscles. They sized her up, some with curiosity, others with thinly veiled disdain. "This is your first fight," Javier told her. "Don't embarrass me." Her opponent was already waiting in the ring, a tall, muscular woman with tattoos snaking up her arms. She smirked when she saw Maya climb in, clearly unimpressed. The crowd jeered and laughed, betting heavily against the newcomer. Maya didn't let it bother her. She took a deep breath, focusing on the task ahead. When the bell rang, the woman charged at her, swinging wildly. Maya ducked and weaved, staying light on her feet. She remembered her father's advice: patience wins fights. Let them tire themselves out. Sure enough, the woman's attacks grew slower, sloppier. That's when Maya struck a sharp jab to the ribs, followed by a quick uppercut. The crowd gasped, stunned by the sudden shift in momentum. Round after round, Maya held her own. Her opponent landed a few hits, leaving bruises that would ache for days, but Maya refused to back down. With each punch she threw, she felt a little piece of herself growing stronger. By the final round, the woman was exhausted, stumbling forward with wild swings. Maya waited for her moment, then delivered a knockout combination, a hook to the pill, jaw followed by a devastating kick to the chest. The woman collapsed, unconscious. The room erupted into chaos. Cheers and curses filled the air as the referee raised Maya's arm in victory. For a moment, she forgot how to breathe. All she could hear was the roar of the crowd. All she could feel was the weight of her own triumph. No one had expected her to win, not even herself. Yet here she was, standing tall in the middle of the ring, proving everyone wrong. Afterward, Javier handed her an envelope stuffed with cash. "Not bad for a rookie," he said, smirking. "You've got potential. Don't waste it." Maya nodded, clutching the envelope tightly. This was only the beginning. Over the next few weeks, Maya fought regularly, climbing the ranks faster than anyone anticipated. Each match brought new challenges, tougher opponents, and bigger payouts. Word spread quickly about the quiet girl who could take down anyone who underestimated her. Some fighters respected her, others resented her rise, but none could deny her skill. Training became her life. Between work, caring for her brother, and preparing for fights, she barely had time to sleep. Her body bore the scars of countless battles, bruises, cuts, sprains, but she pushed through the pain. Every victory brought her closer to paying off her brother's debts, closer to giving them both a chance at a better life. Still, the pressure weighed heavily on her. Fighting in the underground circuit wasn't just physically demanding. It was emotionally draining too. The constant scrutiny, the judgmental stares, the knowledge that one wrong move could cost her everything, it all took its toll. Some nights, lying awake in bed, she wondered if she was losing herself in this violent world. Was she becoming someone her father wouldn't recognize? Someone her brother wouldn't admire? But then she'd think about her brother's smile, the relief in his eyes whenever she told him not to worry about the bills. And she'd remind herself why she started this journey in the first place, for family, for survival, for hope. As Maya continued to rise through the ranks, whispers began circulating about her eventual showdown with Darius, the reigning champion. Known as the Wrecking Ball, he was infamous for his brutal fighting style and undefeated record. To many, facing him seemed like a death wish, but to Maya, it felt inevitable. Sooner or later, their paths would cross. And when they did, she knew it would be the fight of her life. As the weeks went by, Maya's reputation in the underground fighting world grew bigger than anyone expected. People who once dismissed her as just another quiet girl now spoke about her with a mix of awe and fear. She wasn't flashy or loud like some of the other fighters. She didn't trash talk before matches or celebrate wildly after wins, but that's what made her dangerous. You couldn't read her. She didn't give anything away until it was too late. Her rise wasn't easy, though. Every fight left its mark on her body and mind. Bruises bloomed across her arms and legs like dark flowers, fading only to be replaced by new ones. Her knuckles were perpetually raw from punching bags and opponents alike. Sometimes, when she looked at herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the person staring back. The calm barista serving coffee during the day felt like a stranger, compared to the fierce fighter stepping into the ring at night, but this duality kept her grounded. It reminded her that she wasn't doing this for glory or recognition. She was doing it because she had no choice. Word spread fast in the underground circuit, and soon everyone knew who Maya was. Fighters whispered about her technique, how precise and controlled she was, how she never wasted energy throwing unnecessary punches. Fans debated whether she'd make it to the top, while skeptics argued she'd burn out before getting there. Even Javier, the organizer who brought her into this world, seemed surprised by her success. He liked winners, but he also liked drama, and Maya didn't feed into his need for chaos. She stayed focused, keeping her head down and letting her fists do the talking. But not everyone was happy about her rapid climb. Among those watching closely was Darius, the reigning champion known as the Wrecking Ball. He was everything Maya wasn't: brash, intimidating, and utterly ruthless. His fights were brutal spectacles, leaving opponents bloodied and broken. To him, fighting wasn't just about winning. It was about domination. And he hated seeing someone else steal the spotlight. Darius hadn't fought in months, choosing instead to sit back and watch as challengers came and went, none lasting long enough to threaten his title. But Maya was different. She didn't just win. She dismantled her opponents with calculated precision. Each victory brought her closer to earning a shot at the championship belt, a belt that currently rested around Darius's waist. It wasn't long before Javier announced the inevitable showdown. Maya versus Darius, he declared one evening, standing in front of a packed crowd at a makeshift arena. Championship bout, winner takes all. The room erupted into cheers and jeers, bets flying left and right. Some thought Maya stood a chance, pointing to her undefeated streak and technical skill. Others laughed outright, convinced she wouldn't last 5 minutes against Darius. Either way, anticipation crackled in the air like static electricity. Everyone wanted to see what would happen when the quiet underdog faced off against the unstoppable juggernaut. For Maya, the news hit like a punch to the gut. On one hand, she'd been expecting this moment ever since she entered the circuit. Beating Darius meant proving herself beyond doubt, not just to others, but to herself. On the other hand, the reality of facing him terrified her. This wasn't just another opponent. This was a man who lived to destroy people. His size alone was intimidating, let alone his reputation for cruelty inside and outside the ring. Still, She didn't show fear, not to Javier, not to the other fighters, and certainly not to Darius himself. When he approached her after the announcement, sneering down at her like she was nothing more than an insect, Maya met his gaze head on. "You think you're ready?" he growled, leaning close enough for her to smell the sweat and stale alcohol on his breath. "You'll regret stepping into that ring." Maya didn't respond. Instead, she turned and walked away, leaving him fuming behind her. Talking wasn't her style, and she wasn't about to start now. Training for the fight consumed every waking moment. Maya pushed herself harder than ever before, running extra miles, perfecting her footwork, and studying videos of Darius's past matches. She noticed patterns in his fighting style, how he relied on overwhelming force rather than strategy, how he often left himself open after big swings. If she could stay calm and patient, she might have a chance. Her brother noticed the change in her routine. Late nights, early mornings, constant exhaustion. He started asking questions. "Why are you so tired all the time?" he asked one evening, concern etched on his face. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," Maya replied, forcing a smile. "Just busy with work stuff." He didn't look convinced, but he let it drop. Maya hated lying to him, but telling the truth wasn't an option. How could she explain that she was risking everything, not just for their future, but for his? The night of the fight arrived faster than Maya expected. As she stood backstage, waiting for her cue to enter the ring, her heart pounded so hard she could feel it in her throat. The arena buzzed with excitement, fans shouting and stomping their feet. Someone handed her a bottle of water, which she sipped slowly to steady her nerves. She closed her eyes, focusing on her breathing. In, out, in, out. When her name was called, the noise hit her like a tidal wave. Flashing lights blinded her momentarily as she stepped into the ring, the crowd roaring louder than she'd ever heard before. Across from her, Darius loomed like a mountain, his muscles bulging beneath his tank top. A cocky grin spread across his face as he raised his fists, bouncing lightly on the balls of his feet. The referee signaled for them to begin, and the battle started instantly. Darius charged at her without hesitation, swinging wildly with fists like hammers. Maya dodged and ducked, staying just out of reach. She knew better than to engage him directly, not yet. Let him tire himself out first. Round after round, the fight raged on. Darius landed a few heavy blows, sending shockwaves through Maya's body. Pain radiated from her ribs and jaw, but she gritted her teeth and kept moving. Patience. That's what her father always taught her. Patience wins fights. By the third round, Darius was visibly slowing down. Sweat poured down his face, and his swings became less precise, more desperate. Maya seized the opportunity, landing quick jabs to his sides and knees. Each strike fueled her confidence, pushing her closer to victory. But Darius wasn't done yet. In the fourth round, he caught her with a brutal uppercut that sent her stumbling backward. For a moment, stars danced in her vision, and the crowd's cheers faded into a distant hum. She shook her head, forcing herself to focus. No, not here. Not now. Summoning every ounce of strength, Maya launched a counterattack. A sharp hook, too. The temple, followed by a devastating kick to the chest. Darius staggered, his knees buckling beneath him. The referee counted to 10, his voice echoing through the arena. When he raised Maya's arm in victory, the room exploded into chaos. Tears streamed down her face as she stood there, exhausted but triumphant. She had done it. Against all odds, she had beaten the unbeatable. That night, as she lay in bed sore and bruised but smiling, Maya realized something important. She wasn't just fighting for money or survival anymore. She was fighting for herself, for the girl who used to hide in the shadows, for the woman who refused to be underestimated. And for the first time in years, she felt truly alive. The moment Maya's hand was raised in victory over Darius, her life changed forever. The crowd erupted into cheers, not just for the spectacle of the fight, but because they had witnessed something extraordinary. A young woman who no one expected to last a single round had just defeated the most feared fighter in the underground circuit. It wasn't just a win. It was a statement. Maya proved that strength isn't always loud or flashy. It can be quiet, calculated, and relentless. As she stood there, chest heaving and blood trickling from a cut above her eyebrow, Maya felt a strange mix of emotions. There was pride, sure, how could there not be? But there was also relief. Relief that the hardest fight of her life was finally over. Relief that she hadn't let herself down. And relief that maybe, just maybe, she'd earned enough money to ease the crushing weight of her brother's medical bills. Javier appeared almost immediately after the fight, his usual smug grin plastered across his face. "Told you," he said, clapping her on the back. "You're a natural." He handed her an envelope thicker than any she'd received before. Inside was more cash than she'd ever held in her hands at once. For a moment, she simply stared at it, overwhelmed by what it represented. Freedom for her family, for their future. But as the adrenaline faded and reality set in, Maya began to feel uneasy. The roar of the crowd still echoed in her ears, but now it sounded hollow. She looked around at the faces cheering her name, and instead of feeling celebrated, she felt exposed. These people didn't know her. They didn't care about her struggles. Or why she fought. They only cared about the entertainment she provided. To them, she was just another fighter, another pawn in Javier's game. That night, as she sat alone in her apartment with the envelope of cash resting on the kitchen table, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that she was losing herself. Fighting had started as a means to an end, a way to protect her brother and survive. But somewhere along the way, it had become something else. It consumed her days, dominated her thoughts, and left her body battered and bruised. Was this really who she wanted to be? Her brother noticed the change too. Over the next few days, he kept asking questions. "Why are you limping?" He'd say, pointing to the bandage wrapped around her ankle. Or, "What happened to your face?" When he saw the fading bruises under her eyes, Maya brushed him off with vague answers. "I tripped," or "It's nothing, don't worry." But deep down, she hated lying to him. Hated keeping secrets. He trusted her completely. And here she was, hiding half her life from him. One evening, while folding laundry together, her brother finally confronted her. "Something's going on," he said, his voice soft but firm. "You've been acting different lately. You're tired all the time, you come home late, and you look sad." Maya froze, caught off guard. Sad? She hadn't realized she looked that way. "I'm fine," she said automatically, forcing a smile. "Just work stuff," he frowned, clearly unconvinced. "Work doesn't leave bruises like that," he replied, gesturing toward her arms. "Tell me the truth, please." For a long moment, Maya hesitated. She wanted to tell him everything, to explain how desperate she'd been, how scared she'd been of losing him. But the words stuck in her throat. How could she make him understand without breaking his heart? Finally, she sighed and sat down beside him. "Okay," she said quietly, "but promise me you won't get mad." And so, for the first time, Maya told her brother the truth. She explained about the debts, about Javier, about the fights. She showed him the envelope of cash, explaining how much it would help with his treatments. Her voice trembled as she spoke, bracing herself for his reaction. To her surprise, he didn't yell or accuse her of being reckless. Instead, tears welled up in his eyes. "You shouldn't have done this," he whispered. "Not for me." "Yes, I should have," she replied firmly, "because you're my family, because I love you." They hugged tightly, both crying quietly. For the first time in months, Maya felt lighter. Sharing the burden made it easier to carry. Over the following weeks, Maya continued to train and fight, but her perspective shifted. Winning titles and earning money were still important, but they weren't the only things driving her anymore. She started thinking about what came next, after the fights, after the debts were paid off. What kind of life did she want to build? What kind of person did she want to be? She also began noticing the other fighters more closely. Many of them were trapped in the same cycle she was, fighting out of desperation, unable to see a way out. Some were younger than her, barely adults, already hardened by the violence and pressure. Others were older, worn down by years of abuse, their bodies broken beyond repair. Watching them reminded her of her father's stories about discipline and resilience, but also about finding purpose outside the ring. An idea began forming in her mind. What if she could use her skills to help others? Not just to teach them how to throw a punch, but to show them how to stand tall, to believe in themselves. After all, boxing had saved her in more ways than one. Maybe it could do the same for someone else. When she approached Javier with the idea, he laughed at first. "A gym?" he scoffed. "You think anyone's gonna pay for that?" "I don't care if they pay," Maya shot back. "I just want to give people a chance." Javier rolled his eyes but eventually agreed to let her go on one condition. She had to fight one last match, a farewell bout to settle unfinished business. Maya reluctantly agreed, knowing it was the price she had to pay for her freedom. The final fight was brutal, against a seasoned opponent determined to prove she wasn't invincible. By the end, Maya was battered and exhausted, but she walked away victorious. As the referee raised her arm for the last time, she felt a sense of closure wash over her. This chapter of her life was over. Now it was time to start a new one. With the money she'd earned, Maya rented a small space in the neighborhood and transformed it into a community gym. She painted the walls bright colors, hung motivational posters, and filled the room with secondhand equipment. Word spread quickly, and soon kids and teenagers began showing up, eager to learn. Some came for self-defense, others for fitness, and a few just to escape their troubles for a while. Maya taught them everything she knew, not just techniques, but lessons about perseverance, respect, and believing in themselves. She watched as shy, uncertain faces turned into confident smiles, as tentative punches grew stronger and surer. Every day, she saw pieces of her younger self in them, and every day, she felt prouder of the path she'd chosen. Though she occasionally sparred with old friends from the underground circuit, Maya's focus remained on mentoring the next generation. Her story inspired countless others to embrace their own inner strength. Years later, when asked about her journey, she simply smiled. "They used to call me too quiet," she'd say. "But sometimes, silence speaks louder than words." And with that, she returned to training, ready to shape futures as fiercely as she once shaped her own. Maya's new chapter as the owner of a community gym wasn't easy, but it was fulfilling in ways she never imagined. The space itself was modest to small, one-room building tucked between a laundromat and a convenience store, but it quickly became a haven for people who needed it most. Teenagers looking to channel their anger into something productive, single mothers wanting to learn self-defense, even elderly folks eager to stay active. They all found their way to Maya's gym. Every morning, Maya arrived before sunrise to sweep the floors, set up the equipment, and prepare for the day ahead. She didn't have fancy machines or high-tech gear. Instead, she relied on basics like punching bags, mats, and weights. What she lacked in resources, though, she made up for with heart. Her students weren't just numbers. They were individuals with stories, dreams, and struggles. And Maya listened to every one of them. One of her first regulars was a teenage girl named Tina. At 16, Tina already carried herself like someone twice her age, juggling schoolwork, part-time jobs, and taking care of 2 younger siblings. While her mom worked long hours at a factory, she came to the gym hesitant and unsure, wearing oversized sweatpants and avoiding eye contact. But when Maya handed her a pair of boxing gloves and showed her how to throw her first punch, something inside Tina lit up. "You're stronger than you think," Maya told her after class one evening, noticing how hard Tina had been working. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Tina nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "I've never felt this free before," she admitted. "Like I can actually do something about all the stuff that's been weighing me down." That moment stuck with Maya. It reminded her why she started this journey, not just to help others, but to remind them that they had power within themselves. Power to change their circumstances, no matter how impossible things seemed. Over time, Tina grew more confident, both in the gym and outside it. She started standing taller, speaking louder, and even got accepted into a scholarship program she'd given up hope on. When she hugged Maya goodbye on her last day at the gym, saying she'd come back whenever she could, Maya felt a lump rise in her throat. This is what mattered. These moments of transformation. But running the gym wasn't without its challenges. Money was tight, rent, utilities, and supplies added up quickly, and Maya often dipped into her own savings to keep things afloat. There were days when she wondered if she'd made the right decision, leaving behind the lucrative underground. Fights for this uncertain path. Yet every time doubt crept in, someone would walk through the door needing help, and Maya's resolve would strengthen again. Her brother played a big role too. Once his health improved enough for him to join in, he became her unofficial assistant, helping out with everything from organizing classes to fixing broken equipment. He loved seeing his sister thrive in this new role, proud of how far she'd come since those early days of silent sacrifice. Together, they built something beautiful, a place where people felt safe, supported, and empowered. Word spread about Maya's gym, drawing attention not only from locals but also from reporters and social workers curious about her story. One journalist wrote an article calling her the quiet champion, highlighting how she turned personal adversity into a force for good. The piece went viral, bringing donations, volunteers, and even sponsors willing to support her cause. Suddenly, Maya found herself thrust into the spotlight, a position she hadn't sought but couldn't deny helped her mission. Despite the newfound fame, Maya stayed grounded. She refused to let success go to her head, reminding herself daily of the values her father instilled in her: humility, discipline, and compassion. Whenever someone praised her, she redirected the focus to her students. "I'm just teaching them what I learned," she'd say with a shrug. "They're the ones doing the real work." As years passed, the gym expanded. More rooms were added, offering yoga classes, meditation sessions, and workshops on mental health awareness. Maya partnered with local organizations to provide job training programs and educational resources for underserved communities. What began as a tiny space filled with secondhand gear evolved into a thriving hub of empowerment and healing. Still, Maya never forgot where she came from. On quiet evenings, when the gym was empty and the streets outside grew dark, she'd sit alone in the corner, wrapping her hands with tape and hitting the punching bag. It wasn't about training anymore, it was about remembering. Remembering. The fear, the desperation, the sacrifices. Remembering the nights she cried herself to sleep, wondering if she'd ever catch a break. And remembering the victories, both big and small, that brought her here. Her students noticed these late-night sessions and sometimes joined her. They didn't say much, just stood there, watching her move with the same precision and grace that had earned her respect in the underground circuit. Afterward, they'd ask questions. "How did you get so strong?" What kept you going when things got tough? Maya answered honestly, sharing pieces of her past without sugarcoating the pain. She wanted them to know that strength wasn't about being fearless. It was about facing your fears head on, even when your knees shook and your heart raced. One day, a young boy named Leo walked into the gym. Barely 10 years old, he clutched a crumpled flyer in his hand and looked around nervously. When Maya greeted him, he mumbled something about wanting to learn how to protect himself. His dad had left, his mom worked nights, and kids at school picked on him relentlessly. He felt powerless, invisible. Maya knelt down to meet his gaze. "You're not invisible," she said softly. "Not to me. Not here." Over the next few months, Leo blossomed. He learned how to defend himself, yes, but more importantly, he learned how to stand tall. By the end of the year, he was leading warm-ups for the younger kids, cracking jokes and laughing freely. Watching him transform reminded Maya of her own journey. The quiet girl who once blended into the background, now inspiring others to step into the light. Years later, when Maya finally decided to retire from teaching full-time, the gym was thriving. Under the leadership of her former students, Tina ran the youth program, Leo taught self-defense classes, and countless others contributed in their own ways. Maya stepped back to spend more time with her brother, traveling, reading, and enjoying life beyond the ring. On the day of her retirement party, dozens of people gathered to celebrate her legacy. Some were current students, others former fighters, and many were simply friends whose lives she'd touched along the way. As they shared stories and laughed together, Maya stood quietly in the corner, observing the scene with a content smile. When it was her turn to speak, she took a deep breath and addressed the crowd. "When I first opened this gym, I didn't know if anyone would show up. All I knew was that I wanted to give back, to share what I'd learned, to help people find their strength. What I didn't realize then was that you would teach me just as much as I taught you. You reminded me that resilience isn't about winning every fight, it's about getting back up after every fall. And for that, I'll always be grateful." The room erupted into applause, but Maya didn't linger in the spotlight. Instead, she slipped outside, breathing in the cool night air. Above her, the stars twinkled brightly against the dark sky. For the first time in years, she felt truly at peace. She wasn't too quiet anymore, and she didn't need to be. Her actions had spoken louder than any words ever could.